Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to the Easy Come, Easy Go broadcast. This is Wayne Bennett, and this is our 10th episode. And I'd like to give a shout out to Bobby Holly, keyboardist, piano player, organ player. He's Peanut Holly's brother. He used to play with the Hallmarks, and now he does a lot of stuff in the churches and plays for different groups. Really good, and Bobby follows us, and we're glad to hear that. Hey, Bob. And in 1979, Larry Buchanan started a golf tournament, and he wanted to include some of the old guys that caddied over at Black Knight in the 1950s and 60s, and some of the guys that went to Sylvia School. And he ran the tournament for about 5 or 6 years, and then Larry passed away after a plane crash. And Merle Kaiser ran it a year, and then Rod Lilly ran it for several years. And this is our 43rd year. We'll be celebrating on June the 26th at Black Knight. And of course, a lot of the old caddies aren't playing anymore. A few have passed on. Some of them got a little too old to play, but their sons and their grandsons are still playing, and some friends. And so we've been through some floods and pandemics and everything, but the tournament has trudged on. And my guest today, he was one of the caddies that started at Black Knight and has played in the tournament for years, an old Sylvia School boy. And I'd like to welcome Billy Lang. Welcome, Billy.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Well, Billy, tell me a little bit about caddying. I didn't caddy back then. My mom wouldn't let me caddy. My brother caddied all the time and made extra money. But when I got old enough, she let me deliver papers, but she didn't let me caddy. How did you tell me the process? How did you go about caddying? Do you show up or?
Well, the first time I ever caddied, Larry Armstrong and I were friends in grade school. We was 10-year old, and we crossed the fence there at number 5 from Sylvia School going to Black Knight. And we run into a couple people, Dr. John Hedrick's wife and Lawrence Tully, and they didn't have a caddy, so we picked up their bag like on the 6th hole and caddied till the
They didn't have pull carts or anything.
No pull carts, and we caddied.
Okay.
And I was 10 years old, and that's the first time I caddied.
Oh, it are. Now, but didn't you have to get on a list later?
Yeah, and then, you'd always sign up the morning when you got there. In other words, you didn't sign up of the evening. You couldn't sign up. The only two people would sign up early would be Pete and Buck.
Oh, it are.
And, they was always caddied. They was number 1 and number 2.
Really?
But nobody else was number 1.
Now, after you signed up, what did you do?
Well, we had like a caddy house there, and we'd wait. We'd have a caddy master. When the golfers would come in, they would, how many caddies they need. The caddy master, which at that time was Doug Brown, and he would come and get you and keep us in line.
Did the people that play golf, did they pay you, or did Black Knight pay you, or?
No, actually, the golfers paid the caddies. They had a set rate, and we always like to get the tips. You wanted certain golfers you wanted caddy for because some was a better tipper than other ones.
Did some of the golfers ask for particular people? If some guys they liked, some I'm sure they didn't like, maybe.
Right, occasionally they would. Yeah, they would.
Well, 10 years old seemed like it'd be kind of hard to.
It was
carry a bag.
It was.
So now, what was the going rate back then? Do you remember?
65 cents a round.
Is that 9 holes around?
It was 18 holes.
65 cents. And of course, back then you didn't have many opportunities to make money, did you? I mean, there was people didn't have lawnmowers, or if they had them, they had the old rotor type lawnmowers, a lot of them, and so there wasn't many opportunities. Now, did you Did you go over there after school, or mainly on the weekends?
Well, mostly on the weekends, and then when school was out, they was usually let the caddies play golf on Monday. That course was closed on Monday, and usually on Wednesdays, they played in the afternoon. And on Tuesdays was Ladies' Day. There's a lot of ladies played on Tuesday.
Now, did they use caddies most of the time too? Like
Yes, but most, we had, Ladies' Day on Tuesday, and a lot of the business people, doctors, and so on would play on Wednesday afternoon. So Tuesday and Wednesday and the weekends were the busy times.
uh, how many years did you caddy? Do you know?
Well, I don't know, probably up until about 16.
Now, you went to Sylvia School. How many of the guys that went to Sylvia? I mean, how many normally would show up on the weekends? I guess sometimes it kind of hinder how much you got to work.
Well, yeah, that's true. They was a pretty good crowd of golfers that went to Sylvia School that, would caddy.
Now, tell me about Sylvia a little bit. Sylvia went to the eighth grade, and I didn't know this till just a couple of years ago that area at one time was called Atkinsville, and then later was called Sylvia. I wondered where the name came from. I never knew why they called it Sylvia School, but that East Beckley area at one time was called Sylvia. Any particular teachers, anybody that stood out as good ones or bad ones you were scared of?
Well, Miss Bailey was the toughest one.
She taught
fifth grade.
Fifth grade. Yeah, she was there when I started, but she left. I think she retired or left before I got to the fifth grade, and I ended up having with Miss Meadows. She taught fifth and sixth grade, kind of split up, and Miss Hedrick taught sixth grade. And then when I got to the seventh grade, Miss Colley had been there forever, and then she retired, and I had a teacher named Miss Kesey. And who was your eighth grade teacher at that time?
I think Miss Reardon.
Miss Reardon.
And Mr. Miller, I think he taught some in the eighth grade. He was the principal.
Did you ever get any whippings in Sylvia?
Oh, many, many. And, the Miss Bailey, she could lay it on you.
I never got too many whippings at Sylvia, but I did one time right after lunch. Two old boys broke out in a fight out there on the yard playground, and three or four of us decided to stay out there and watch them. And so when the bell rang and everybody went in, we was out there watching these two guys fight. And Mr. Miller, he beat on the window out there and waved us in. Well, when we came inside, we was in about the fourth or fifth grade. When we came inside, we started running up the steps real fast, trying to get to class, and he called us back down. And I think he gave everybody that watched, he just gave us one swat, and he gave the boys fighting, I think he gave them three swats. But I got to thinking later, not only did I get a whipping from the principal, but he was also the mayor of Beckley at that time. Not too many people had that opportunity back then. The job was part time, and Mr. Miller was also the basketball coach, wasn't he?
Yes, he was the basketball coach and the principal.
Now let's go back to the golf tournament just a second. You were in the group the night that they started talking about starting a GEBO, Greater East Beckley Open. Where were you guys? What have you guys been doing? Where were you at?
Well, we played basketball on Friday night at Woodrow. A bunch of us from the area, from East Beckley, and we'd always go to Jimmy's place to have something to drink, and then we got to talking there about having a golf tournament. Of course, Larry Buchanan, he was the head of everything, and we decided, well, we're just going to have a golf tournament called the Greater East Beckley Open. So that's really where it started, at Jimmy's place.
Well, when Larry called me, of course, you played golf, didn't you?
Yes,
And
yes.
did you ever have any? I mean, did you pick the game up by just playing on Mondays with?
Well, we played as caddies. We always had some golf clubs. Matter of fact, a lady that was a member of the club there gave me a set of clubs when I was very young.
Uh-huh. So
But,
you learned by practical experience, then.
right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the golfers would let us use their clubs.
Uh-huh.
Matter of fact, the gentleman that built Lake Springs, Austin Caperton, he let me use his clubs. I caddied for Austin a lot, and he would let me use his clubs.
I remember I was working at the Y, and Larry Buchanan called me and he said, "We're going to have this golf tournament. The guys grew up East Beckley." I'd never played golf in my life. And I said, "Well, I'll come out there and hang around, but I'm not going to play golf." I said, "I don't even own any golf clubs." And I said, "I never played." And so it's a couple days later, I come home and there's a set of golf clubs on my front porch. Now, they weren't the greatest clubs in the world, but they were in an old bag, and there was about five of them. There was a driver, a putter, 9 iron, 8 iron. I don't know what the other one was, but then he called me back the next day and said, "Well, you don't have an excuse now." And I think one of the first times I ever played, I went out with him, and of course, haven't improved any since that time. But that's how we got started. And the first tournament that I remember, we played teams on Saturday, right?
Right.
And then we played individuals on Sunday. And this was out at Cool Ridge. Some people called it the Rock Pile or the Lakeview golf course. And Steve Wood, I think, ran it. And
Yes.
he was a great guy. He welcomed us. And I don't know how many golfers we had in that first one, but the first year, everybody stood around and watched you teed off the first year.
Right.
We didn't start it. Shotgun starts. And so it was especially for us bad ones, it was kind of embarrassing. But and so that's how it went. Now you've won the tournament several times. You have any idea how many times you won?
I've won it 19 times.
19 times, and we're starting the 23rd year, or 43rd year. And there at the beginning, though, there was I know one time you and Charlie Lilly had a tie, and y'all played 3 or 4 holes.
We actually played 5 holes,
5 holes.
and Charlie beat me on the 5th hole.
Well, tell us a little bit about Charlie. He's from the guys back in the 50s and 60s. He kind of helped raise a few of the kids. When did you first run into him?
Well, I was just a kid there, and he had a candy truck, and he was always good to us boys. In other words, he was always around us playing basketball or doing something. But he was one of a kind.
He was.
He was one of a kind, Charlie, and he loved to fish, play golf. Just so many things that we did together as kids.
And he played basketball up until I don't know how old he was when he finally quit, but he was pretty competitive. One of the most competitive people that I've ever ran into. Um, After, of course, you have a nephew, Timmy Boggs, has won the tournament several times too, and then we've switched around quite a bit. After so many years, Cool Ridge closed down, and we went to Black Knight for a year or so, and then one year we played out Woodhaven at Glade, and then Hamp Hensley got us to come up to the Briar Patch. Played up there several years, and then they closed down too. And now we're back at Black Knight. A lot of people think that's where we are to be. There's some good and bad. Thing about Black Knight, it's only 9 holes, so it kind of limits you sometimes to the number of players, But it's in the East Beckley. How would you describe your as growing up as a kid? What if you had to describe it, what was life like as a child back in the 50s and the
Well, it was pretty exciting. None of us had anything, but we had a lot of love and a lot of fun. Uh, you know, everybody that grew up in East Beckley, there's a lot of great people come out of East Beckley.
and you know what people, of course, everybody always talks about the hard times, but we didn't have school buses to elementary schools back during that time, and I don't know how far you had to walk to school, but uh, and it didn't seem like they closed school that often either. I remember one time walking with my sister, and it was 18 below zero, and I was in the first grade, and and I can remember some of those kids would come in. We had them old radiators at the school, and they would be literally frozen, and they would sit by the radiator the first
Right.
hour or so when they got. And I can't even imagine if you remember Ivan Quessenberry. He lived at the end of the road at Gray
Right.
Flats, and how in the world he got to school, I have no idea. But he didn't miss too much. A name I'll throw at you, Pee Wee Bonds. What you remember, Pee Wee?
Yeah, I remember Pee Wee. He had a store there. A lot of people at lunchtime from school they'd go to Pee Wee's.
Was it a filling station too?
You know, I can't remember if it's a station there or not. But
I think it was a filling station, and then Pee Wee kind of went into the cigarette business too. He had vending machines all
right,
over the place, and they would. I know my brother Tommy had worked in driving a truck and filling up the cigarette machines. I think sometimes it goes as far away as Charleston, and then they built I think it was a golf station across the street
yes,
from there,
they did.
and that was. But if you'll remember down that road, of course, you had Richmond Cleaners. A lot of people back then had their clothes dry cleaned and stuff. And what were some of the other places do you remember out through that?
They had Beaver's Groceries, was across from Richmond Cleaners. Matter of fact, the first golf cart I ever saw, Jess Richmond on Richmond Cleaners brought it to Black Knight.
Really?
And a bunch of us boys jumped on it to ride it with him. And we was coming up South Canoa Street, and I was on the side of the golf cart, and there was a telephone pole there, and I caught my leg on the pole as he went by.
About how old were you when that
Probably 12 years old.
12 years old? And yeah, you mentioned Beaver's Grocery. We used to go in there, and there was, I think it was two sisters that
Yeah.
ran the place, and I assumed their name was Beavers. I wasn't sure, but they were nice. They was always special, and they ran tabs and accounts for people to help people get through the tough times. And I'm sure they didn't get paid for everything. You remember Hamp's Grill down
Oh, yeah. Everybody talked about Hamp's Grill.
there?
And
Yeah,
of
I
course,
don't think I
Hamp
was
was,
ever in there.
well, I went in there a few times, and Hamp was always sitting over, and he was a chain smoker. He smoked one after another.
What about where I know Southern Chemical was on the same side of the road, but was there a store there before? Do you remember where there was a store before Southern Chemical? I think the American Legion's there now.
You know, I can't remember if there was.
And I know Wilson's had a furniture
Right.
store. And then, of course, on up the road, you had Barracks, and you had the liquor
The liquor
store,
store was right there, yeah.
certainly. But um, Crooks was there somewhere, Matt Crook, and uh, I'm not sure exactly where that place was. And then in the barber shop, uh, Boland's Barber Shop.
Right.
Well, I remember my dad cut our hair sometimes when he was at home, and he had them old kind of cutters that would just you squeeze. They weren't electric. I think he pulled more hair
Right.
than he
Yeah, I've done that a few times.
than he cut. But I remember when I was in about the 7th or 8th grade, and Rod Thorne and Jerry West, they were the popular guys from West Virginia, and so all of us boys, we tried to get our hair cut like them. They get a flat top, and Mr. Boland, he cut our hair that way. Of course, some of them looked a lot better than the others, but he'd charge you a little extra to put the wax on your hair to keep your hair stood up. But uh, then my sister worked at Steps Dry Cleaners, and she told me she worked the front counter, and I think she made 45 cents an hour. I don't know how hard she worked actually, but she said that you mentioned Pete and Buck, and they were the first. They were always the first caddies at the Black Knight, and what was their last name? Do you remember?
I'm thinking it was Jackson.
Jackson. And then they used to go around and pick up pop bottle. Back then, you could cash in pop bottles, and
Yeah,
them guys were in pretty good shape. They did a
yeah.
lot of walking, and uh, the when did you leave East Beckley? How old were you, and what were you doing?
Well, when I was 16 years old, I went to North Carolina and worked in a restaurant for a few weeks. A fellow owned a grocery store there in East Beckley named Bill Parrott. They had Parrott's Market, and he was in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he came in, and I was always hung around his grocery store, and he taken me down there, and I worked a while.
And then you came back.
Then I came back, and then I worked at a service station, Ryan Lily's Texaco station there, till I was about 18. Then I worked at Day and Night Garage in Beckley.
I think everybody grew up in East Beckley, worked at Ryan's sometime or
Everybody
another. I
worked at
know a
Ryan's.
couple of my cousins, Okie and Wilson, and my brother worked there a while. And Ryan, he was. My sister tells a funny story. Now Ryan he liked to drink a little liquor every once in a while.
Right,
And my sister and another girl named Mary Fitzgerald, they borrowed a car off a guy. Neither one of them had a driver's license. They skipped school, borrowed a car off a guy, and they went to Ryan's, and he gave them some gas on credit. And these girls were 15 years old, didn't have a driver's license, and I'm not sure whether they ever paid him or not. But luckily, they didn't wreck the car or nothing. But I can't imagine somebody loaning a car with kids didn't have that. Now you got into the. How often do you play golf now?
well, I like to play 3 times a week.
And you play out of state a lot, some in the winter.
And yeah, we usually not as much now that I've gotten older, but when we was younger, we played a lot on the weekends. We'd go everywhere.
Now Billy's one of the guys who can still shoot his age occasionally, and I tell everybody I can shoot my age, but people don't know that I'm 145 years old. They don't realize that. And just a few years ago, the golf tournament we switched. We have some team competition. You can enter as a team, or you can still enter as an individual. We have age groups, and it seems to have gotten a little attention especially some of the golfers that don't play a lot. They
Right.
like the team concept. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's great. It's great to have a team. Everybody can get together and have a good time.
Now, Mike Mays has played the last 2 years, and Mike grew up down there on. He's one of them guys who went to Lincoln School. He didn't go to Sylvia, but it's pretty close to East Beckley, and he's won the tournament last couple of years, and Mike's no spring chicken, but what's why do you think he does so well out there? What how does that course fit him?
Well, he's a real good golfer. He's been a good golfer ever since he's just a young man. He plays a lot of golf, and he's really a good player. Because he play well anywhere he goes.
Is his short game the
Well,
better?
I don't know. He's got pretty good length too, so he's just all around good player.
And with kind of looking forward, I don't know whether he'll be back this year or not. We haven't sent any letters out or anything like that. But this is an invitation. Anybody that hears the podcast, if you've never played in a GEBO and you're from that area, or if you're just interested, you can email me at awbennett, small letters, 50 um, at gmail.com. And I'll let you know what you have to do to get in the tournament. And we're going to send letters out here in the middle of April, and we'll have a deadline. We only take 52 golfers because Black Knight has 26 carts and two people to a cart. So it sometimes it uh, we have to have a waiting list. So if you are interested, you can contact me there, and we'd be glad to have you. Um, haven't heard any word yet. Talked to Donald McAllister the other day, and last year we've had a silver reunion for several years, and last year um, we didn't get to have one because of the pandemic. And this year, Donald's still thinking about it. Black Knight has not totally opened up their restaurant yet. They're doing some takeout and things like that, but so he's not sure that there is going to be a Sylvia reunion yet. But as soon as we find out, we'll let you know, and if anyone's interested in coming to that. But it would be, if he does have it, it would be on the Friday um, before our golf tournament. The golf tournament's always the Saturday after Father's Day, and the we love to see you either at the if we have a reunion, or come and play golf with us. One other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know whether you were in the Boy Scouts or not, or my brother was in the Boy Scouts for a short period of time, and Al Ellison was the Boy Scout leader, and my brother thought the world of him. And we St. Mary's, when I was growing up, we didn't even know we didn't know whether it was a Methodist, Baptist, or whatever. It didn't make any difference. But St. Mary's was always kind of a center of activity. They had Halloween parties and things like that, and we would always go to those activities. Sometimes we go to church, not as often as we should, uh, but now I think St. Mary's is kind of struggling. They're not. I'm not even sure they're open every Sunday. They kind of combine. So things have changed over the years. But growing up East Beckley, uh, before we started talking, you got into the concrete business and you worked for an East Beckley guy.
Yeah, David and his family was from East Beckley as well.
Speaking
And
about David Hill,
David Hill, yeah, and we caddied together, and he worked on the golf course, and he went to Chicago and got into concrete, and he came back here in 1968, and he got a hold of me and wanted me to go work with him. So that's how I got into it. So I worked for him from 68 to 77, and then he went into the ready mix concrete and went out of construction, and that's when I started my business in November of 1977.
and you're still going now.
Still going.
That's a lot of concrete.
You can't quit. My daughter just tell me, you just got it in your blood. You can't quit.
Well, Billy, I sure thank you for coming by and talking with us, and maybe we'll get you back on before the golf tournament. And you know, I'm glad that you hope you'll be able to play this year, and you might win the thing again, make it 20.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, of course, when you get a little older, you can hear your ball land. It don't go quite as far, but it's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you having me. And it's a lot of fun, and reminiscing about all the people, we grew up with in East Beckley and caddied and done different things with. It was really a lot of fun. A lot of fun growing up. A lot of good people.
Sure is. And don't get to see them enough. So
That's
hopefully
right.
get some of them people out here. Well, that's it for our show today. And we'd like to remind everybody if you want to get in contact with me, awbennett50@gmail.com. Glad to hear from you. And remember, if you ain't dead yet, you ain't done yet. Until next time, God bless you.